and welcome to Lincoln Center Stage. We're thrilled that you've joined us here tonight for our All-American program. My name is Grace, and I'm from Orange County, California. And I'm joined by my wonderful friends and colleagues, Emily on violin, and Emily is from Seattle, Washington, Maria from New York City, Tong is our honorary Canadian, so she's from Edmonton, Alberta, and Michael is from Chicago, Michael on viola. So we're just really excited to present this wonderful program of music for you tonight. This is music from all over America, across several different time periods and genres. We're going to be hearing not only music from the classical composers like Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein, but also things that they wrote from the Broadway genre. Always we have some jazz for you, and then just some masterpieces of the classical repertoire that are so iconically American, and it's just a really great evening of music that just celebrates this wonderful, rich diversity we have of music and art in our country. So we're just happy that you're here with us, and we're going to share a little bit about the music with you. So, how many of you recognize that tune we just played? Yeah. So, awesome. Okay, so that is Aaron Copland's Hoedown. And it's just used everywhere, and it's such a great representation of the Wild West. I know I heard it many times at the Calgary Stampede, where I was at this summer, with all the cowboys, cowgirls, and the corn dogs, and everything. So it's really exciting to play that kind of music that has such folk influence in this very classical piano quintet format. So next, we're going to play for you some jazz. This is a piece by Dave Brubeck. It's Blue Rondo a la Turk.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to another classic American sound, which is of course Broadway. And we can't think of American music and the history of American music without playing at least one show tune. But this is a little bit different than the usual, Hammerstein and Rogers type musical. This is one of my favorite musicals, and it just so happened that this was written about the Upper West Side, and of course this is Leonard Bernstein's West Side Story. It's a very different sound than what you would expect to hear in New York City in a Broadway musical, or even something that you might see that's on tour. And it's so fun to play, and it's quite hard for musicians to read for the very first time. There's a lot of different meters, there's a lot of different counting that we have to do that isn't typical, and it's a lot of really cool effects that we get to play, like jets and, all the different, the sharks and the jets. So this is the prologue from West Side Story, and I'm sure many of you might have seen the movie version of this, and if you have, a lot of the dancing scenes or a lot of the major scenes where the showdowns happen was actually filmed right across the street from Lincoln Center, right behind it in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which happens to be where I went to high school. And I actually played this in high school, and it was so cool to learn that right outside our walls was exactly where the movie was filmed. So lots of ties to my personal life as well. So we hope you enjoy. This is the prologue to West Side Story by Leonard Bernstein.
musical as well. It's so interesting to think of this Shakespeare story, Romeo and Juliet, kind of transformed into this Broadway New York scene, you know, people fighting and living life in New York City. And that brings us to our next piece. We're going to go back a little bit to the 1920s when Rhapsody in Blue, George Gershwin's great piano solo, was first premiered in New York City. And when it was first premiered, it was George Gershwin. He didn't even write out the music. He just sat down at the piano with the jazz band and kind of improvised on the spot this amazing solo. And it was so successful, he later had to write it down. And I had this great professor when I was at Juilliard, Martin Verdrager. I don't know if you ever had it, but he was, maybe Maria knows.
He went to my high school.
Yeah, this guy is like so quintessentially New York. And, you know, he walks in, he runs around Juilliard School, and he's wearing cowboy boots and these kind of half-moon glasses, a scarf, just totally out of place for, you know, when there's ballerinas walking around. And he actually told me a really cool story of this piece, that when it was first premiered, you know, of course, George Gershwin knew what he wanted to do, and he knew how to play all the rhythms in the piano solo, because it was just in his blood, you know, he was composing the music, but also just spitting it out on the spot. But for the orchestra, it wasn't really the same story. They didn't really know how to play these jazzy rhythms, you know, coming out from the nightclubs and the cabarets, you know, during the roaring 20s. This music was actually being invented at the time. We kind of take it for granted that jazz music is just part of our lives. But back in the 20s, this piece was really almost like experimental music, especially being in a concert hall setting. So George Gershwin wrote out the orchestra parts later, and you'll hear this very funny solo in the beginning that I play. It was originally for clarinet, and this history professor told us that in the premiere, George Gershwin wrote out all these 16th notes, which are like a very fast note value, and you'll hear this ascending scale in the clarinet passage. But the clarinetist was so nervous because they had all these orchestra musicians playing Beethoven symphonies had no idea how to play these jazz, quirky, you know, rhythms and licks. And the guy was so nervous that he made a huge boo-boo error. He just kind of cracked up, and you'll hear it slide in the beginning, just a huge glissando. So it's always been this kind of legend for clarinetists, if you ever hear it in the concert hall, to just do a huge glissando and ignore the music of what's actually written. But this is just a great piece. It's one of the most demanding piano solos, and you'll hear our great Canadian pianist sound American tonight. She really will blow your eyes out of water. It's really, you know, if she had $1 for every amazing note she played, she'd be a millionaire. And this is really some of the best top music. You're hearing a great pianist, so enjoy George Gershwin's wonderful Rhapsody in Blue.
band, and then for symphony orchestra and piano. So we're just so thrilled to be able to bring a little piece of that here. It's such incredible music, and really, I hope it touched you as much as it does to us. So now we've come to our last piece of the evening, and before we get to that, we want to invite you to our next program, which is at 7:15, which is our Brahms Masterworks. And this is our second Masterworks concert of the cruise, and this is an incredible work of music. It really captures everything, like sorrow, joy, everything you can imagine, and it's just this epic work. We're playing the whole thing from beginning to finish. And of course, before we play it, we'll share a little bit about the music with you. And so we hope that you'll come back at 7:15. It's the only time we're playing it on this cruise, so please come and hear it. And then at 9 o'clock, we're repeating the All-American program, so if there's a piece that you loved and want to hear again, or if you missed something, please do come back. And then tomorrow we're off, so we will be hanging out with you around the ship. Anyone wants to do laps around the promenade, we'll be trying to get some exercise. And and then we'll be back the following evening. So, and we're looking forward to two more concerts tonight. And now to complete tonight's program, we're going to be playing for you. It's interesting to kind of do back-to-back. Two, I'd say Rhapsody in Blue and Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring are two of the great masterpieces of American music, especially from the 20th century. And this is a piece of music that we're going to leave you with in kind of a more reflective mood. This is an incredible work of art that was composed in 1944. It was a collaboration between Copland and Martha Graham, the great dancer, and it was music to be played with a ballet that she choreographed. And it tells the story of a spring celebration with American pioneers of the 19th century, and they have just completed building a Pennsylvania farmhouse, and our main characters are a young bride and groom. And the main body of this piece that we're about to play is variations on a Shaker hymn called Simple Gifts. Many of you know this song. You'll immediately recognize it. Maybe you've sung it. And I think one of the incredible things about so much of the music we've heard tonight in this American program is that the composers or songwriters took music that they were hearing like out with the people. So like with West Side Story, Leonard Bernstein was taking the sounds of New York City with the Puerto Rican beats. We heard a little bit of that in that music. And Copland especially, the hoedown that we played at the top of the program, he had actually heard recordings of a fiddle player from Tennessee playing that tune, and then he turned that into a concert work. And similarly with Appalachian Spring, he was taking the sounds of America and creating an incredible work of art for dance and music. And this song, Simple Gifts, is kind of the main melodic material, but around that he creates just this incredible atmosphere of light and beauty. And I think overall the mood of this piece and what he was trying to say artistically was just creating an incredible atmosphere of gratitude and gratefulness. It's a piece that ends with a prayer, and it's very simple music. And I think that's something that was a hallmark of Copland. Around the same time, before World War II, he wrote a piece called Fanfare for the Common Man, which also you may know. And it's so interesting, the concept of writing a fanfare for the common man as opposed to fanfares traditionally for kings and queens and royalty and the leaders, but his kind of idea that the everyday man should be celebrated and everyday life should be celebrated is something that he encapsulates in Appalachian Spring by ending the piece in an incredibly touching and beautiful prayer. So we hope that you enjoyed this evening of American music, and this is the ending of Appalachian Spring by Aaron Copland.